Hello East Africa, welcome to UBC Television Inspiring Uganda. Now, our region has always been a landscape of endless symposia and white papers. Today, we want to crash down the white papers and bring issues on board.
I think the nature of industrialization that exists within Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Congo, Somalia, South Sudan is not proportional to those that exist within the Western world. But the thing is, we still actively have the harms of climate change in the vast majority of instances. This looks like famine in Kenya. This looks like droughts in Uganda. Freaking mudslides and landslides within Uganda that's happening when you don't actively cause this, because there's a ripple effect of these particular things.
We know very well that 70% of Africa's population are youth. It simply means that youth have the power to change and influence communities. This week, we bring you to Makerere University as it hosts the East African Universities Debate Championship. And their theme, as earlier said, the role of the youth in Africa's transformation. Let's be together as we enjoy this.
I start my speech in 3, 2, 1, go. Panel OO is very funny in this debate. They argue a couple of three things they argue in this debate. First of all, when you put a total ban on finished product, because what we are saying here is that we are only putting a ban on finished product, we can import machines. We're still doing trade with them regardless. That is first thing to note. Secondly, they say when you put a total ban on finished products, these people will have no incentive to trade with us. This is a lie. Notice that East Africa is very rich in terms of agricultural products, coffee, tea, they have minerals, things like gold, diamond. These are things that most Asian countries doesn't have. They still trade with us regardless. You have to lie better. So there are all cases on, oh, Mara, these people wanted with us, can't fly in this debate, because these people, they don't have most of the things we have. East Africa is very blessed with these things. These are things that they still want to trade with us regardless. So these guys are lying to you. You shouldn't buy to that nonsense. Secondly, what they say is that the situation is very urgent. In East Africa, so we need to have mechanisms in place to sort out short-term benefits. Because notice then, our plan is to sort long-term benefits. Notice then, already in East Africa, there are already policies put in place to make sure that the environment is protected. Like in Kenya, there's like drive to plant like 1 billion trees, right? In Uganda, you guys had a cleaning day. You know, there's also like plastic policy in Kenya. You can't use plastic policies. These are policies, and this is just a start. These are policies that are put in place here to protect and conserve the environment. So these guys can't argue that in our world there are no mechanism whatsoever to set aside to protect the environment. Secondly, there are environmental agencies in East African countries, like there's NEMA in Kenya, there's also one in Uganda, there's one in Zambia, there's one in Rwanda. All of these are agencies that are put in place here to make sure that the environment is protected and that to protect the environment. Okay, now that we've taken these people out here, what do you get from us? So already on retaliation, we already put to you that East Africa is very rich in terms of resources and minerals. These people will still trade with us regardless. So already taken that one out. Here, why do we own capacity here? Why do you think we have the capacity? But this is then what Joanna tells you. Joanna tells you that we are only importing machines. It therefore means then we're still doing trade with these people regardless. If the issue is that we don't have machines, we're already importing the machines. Secondly, chair, we already have
I'm gonna start my speech now. I'm going to do a couple of things in this debate. I'm going to extend on Nelson's case, and I'm going to show you why you're at best if we are third, OG must be fourth. Firstly, there needs to be an innate understanding on why Asia is the leading distributor of these energy resources and this particular renewable energy in a vast majority of instances. Because I think the fault with OG's case is they fail to understand the nature or how the energy industry most likely works. That's why they're able to run such funny claims like, oh, we have the capacity to do this as East African countries. They need to understand why China, India, Japan, Korea, Hong Kong are doing these particular things. It's because they have actively invested in renewable energy for a very long period of time. Beyond that, there is a prioritization of these particular industries within these particular countries that looks like China scrapping off humanity courses within the university because there's an innate need to prioritize these particular things. That means that they have a couple of things. Firstly, they don't just have capacity in terms of technocrats because of people that have gone to school, but they also have access to information that African countries, even with the best universities, don't have that innate access to, because they have a fast mover advantage within the global economy just because they control the economy. That means that at best, they still have a leading priority, or they still have that fast mover advantage when it comes to the global world. We tell you, at best, even when we choose to prioritize sovereignty, East African countries cannot be at that level. The second thing is who actively harms the environment and who faces. I think the nature of industrialization that exists within Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Congo, Somalia, South Sudan is not proportional to those that exist within the Western world. But the thing is, we still actively have the harms of climate change in the vast majority of instances. This looks like famine in Kenya. This looks like drought in Uganda. Freaking mudslides and landslides within Uganda that's happening when you don't actively cause this, because there's a ripple effect of these particular things. What this does to show you is show that the alternative of cleaning streets in Uganda for 1 day a month, the alternative of Kenya actively planting trees, is not enough. That means that we need to have the capacity to actively curb these particular harms at a level within which the harms exist in the global scope. We tell you on that side of the house, they can't do this. The second thing is the need to understand, when do you value sovereignty? I think sovereignty in and of itself sounds like a beautiful principle. That's why I asked him what it means to be sovereign. He says for sovereignty, it means that you have to act on your own. Not. PM concedes to the fact that in where we need to understand that, number one, these are nations that dominate in terms of global supply when it comes to clean energy, right? Now, what does that particularly mean? It means, number one, Western nations view them as this. Number one, a threat to their growing clean energy economies, right? Now, what does this bring to them? It means, number one, Western nations have already started imposing very high tariffs on these kind of nations with the goal of making their clean energy in their countries most likely more expensive to give room for their own to sell within their economy. What does this look like? It means, number one, Asian nations already look at that as a very big expense on their side of the world, right? That's why the biggest market ship goes to East African nations. Now, what does that come with? Number one, it comes with this. They come to East African nations. Why? Because they believe they will get the highest market. Number two, because also, secondly, since at the end of the day now, the rest of the remaining resources that have been left from being sold on the other side would most likely be brought back here. That leads to things like dumping. That means, number one, would most likely receive the most maybe the remains of whatever was sold there at the end of the day, right? Now, even if that is particularly not the case, right? Now, this is where I'm going to show to you why East African nations are most likely their biggest targets, and even when we actually impose these high tariffs to them, they will most likely not withdraw from East African nations. Number one, because Western nations are already imposing very high tariffs to them, right? They will shift this side, right? Because they hope to sell at a very cheaper or more affordable rate. When we impose these high tariffs on theirs, it means, number one, there's already a comparative of which one is higher. Imposing them tariffs on dollars or versus East African nations imposing here. Those most likely sell here more because, number one, they'll find it easier. Number two, it is because East African nations, being the ones with very little growing economy in terms of clean energy resources, they are providing the most or the highest target market to them. So they will still continue to sell because we still have the biggest kind of markets to them at the end of the day. The alternative is they cannot shift or withdraw from us because even Western nations are imposing them very high taxes at the end of the day. I'll show to you why this is particularly very important when it comes to the sovereignty of East African nations. Now, first of all, clarity I want to make. When we talk about imposing a substantial protectionist tariffs, we mean that we want to impose very high taxes on this particular kind of industries to ensure or create a ground whereby, number one, when they bring in or when we import things into our nations, they are very expensive at the end of the day, so that the people in the nations or the locals in itself have a chance to actually end up buying there or engaging within their market itself to ensure that they buy from the local industries, right? Because the ones being imported are most likely very much expensive at the end of the day. This is trying to bring or buy in the competitive advantage to our side of the world to create a growing economy at the end of the day. On the idea of capacity, number one, we think even when we talk about skills and all this and that already existing, when it still comes to funding at the end of the day, we can still get more funding as East African nations because, one, the taxation we are imposing on this kind of things coming into the East African nations is...
We're not trying to attack any team, we're just defending our case, and let the rest, then we shall rest it. Yeah. So my speech shall start in the name of God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Panel, I think climate change affects most of the African countries, hence it is an urgent issue to be solved in order for us to mitigate this problem. why do Asian countries play a pivotal role in terms of combating this problem that has left millions of people going hungry, most of the people like in Nairobi, people like floods, etc. These are the harms of climate change that affects businesses, etc. And that is the thing. I think from closing opposition, our case is going to be very simple. The first thing is going to prove to you the 4 principles as to why this thing, like collaboration with like the Asian countries, is very important within the East African countries as opposed to what they talk about. But the second thing that I'm going to do is to prove to give you how our counter policy and how it is going to work to mitigate these problems. But lastly, just to prove to you like the impacts of banning, the impacts that are going to happen on their side and how deleterious they are to the economy as well as the people in general. And my partner Ted will come and run the harms and benefit analysis, then we win this particular debate. The first thing is, I think our counter policy is this. It looks like is like to import this particular technology so that we can replicate it over time, because we are able to prove to you that since time immemorial, I think most of these East African countries, they are still behind in terms of this technology. We need this particular technology in order for us to mitigate the harms of climate change that exist. When it comes to the production of the electric cars, like when it comes to like this renewable energy like solar and wind, harnessing all these things, I think we need the collaboration with the Asian countries like China because of 2 things. First, the kind of capacity that they have, but secondly, the willingness that they have to collaborate with us. I think what they tell you is that at the point in time we are able to collaborate as the East African countries, the first thing is that we're able to pull the resources together in order for us like to venture into this mission that we have. I think that is not particularly true, and this is the reason why. Most of the pressing issues that East Africans face, I think they are very, very bad. But the other thing is like the self-sufficiency within the industrial sector of the East African countries is something that we cannot counter. But I think the second counter policy looks like, the second one is like we subsidize the cost of renewable energy so that we can make it accessible to everyone. What it does is that it spreads it to a vast majority of the people. We are limiting the kind of climate change pollution. For instance, like on their side, I think we have the increased dependency on petroleum, oil, etc., which is so harmful, especially like what we are encountering right now, like when the Strait of Hormuz is being closed time and again, the petrol is going up. I think they don't have an alternative. At the point in time you raise these tariffs, it means that you disincentivize, like the Asian countries, they have focus in other countries. I think they still have alternatives, not just within East Africa, like West Africa, like South Africa. These minerals still exist within those countries. They don't do anything to prove to us that they are not going to opt into that particular thing. But the 4 principles that we present to you is, the first one is on the idea of efficiency. We tell you that it is able to save time and uses the least resources, because this kind of collaboration means that the Asian countries like China, etc., they're able to pool their resources and invest like these energy plant, like these green energy plants within our countries, like Kenya, what is happening right now, like the electric cars, bikes, etc. At the point in time you chase them away, it means that your economy is going to go down.
I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, and 1. So Africa is poor, it's dying because of poverty. We think, yes, East African states are poor. But the thing that we're ignoring is, over years, they have been trying to make ways of pulling themselves out of the poverty. What Cynthia says is that, no, cry about your poverty, die in your poverty, you're not going to escape out of it. Currently, when you look at East Africa, their main motive over years is to be able to create a self-sustaining industrialization within those states. They are trying to make budgets, do all those things that are maybe going to help them develop. And we think that is what we're trying to show you, that us having Asian renewable energy products coming in and out is a threat to the growth of these industries that we are fighting so hard to develop. Then the other thing they talk about is that, oh, you know what, maybe engineers from Makerere are so dumb, but because maybe those ones from Shanghai and Korea are very brilliant, let us not give chance for the talent here not to go. We think that is very bad. Even if they have limited information, we think the limited information they have is closest to them, is closest to the problems that they have. The climate change they talk about. Korea has never come to Uganda to research about the climate change problems you're facing for them to go and make products that directly fit into your problems to be able to solve them. Who is closest to doing that? It is us, the East Africans, and we think we do have a right to have a chance to be able to solve these specific problems. Then the other thing they talk about is that, oh, East Africans cannot be at the same level, we cannot access the same information, but we should understand these things do not happen overnight. We still need a chance. How do we establish this chance to grow? How best are we going to grow is if we are able to grow within our own markets. Their side does not allow East African industries to even grow within their markets. Even the products you're producing, your locals are not going to be able to consume them. How then will you be able to grow and at the end of the day be able to solve the problems that you understand best, better than the Asians that you know you're trying to look up to as people who are going to solve your problems? I think that is very bad. And then also when you look at what CO has to say, climate change is very bad, the agency has to exist. I think our opening actually answers this already. Yes, climate change might be urgent, but you realize when you rely on those products that are coming from far away, they are only going to help you for the short time. Because at the end of the day, you're going to import a solar panel that you're going to rely on. You do not have access to maybe the spare parts. Even if you're to get them, it becomes so hard and more expensive in the long run. The better thing is if you understand that, oh, there is an industry within my country, and this is not a myth. These are things that are happening. Uganda itself is trying to manufacture their own electric buses. But are we going to use them? Cynthia says no. Don't use them because the ones that are coming from Seoul are better. Don't use them because China is producing. We think that is very, very bad. Then the other thing that still comes from CO, the whole idea that East Africa is still behind on technology. For how long are we just going to cry about the problems that are existing within Africa if there is no way of solving them? We already tell you we have universities that are teaching these things. Do you think the lecturers that are teaching these things get their knowledge from somewhere that is different from where those people get theirs? We think that is something that is not considerate of what is happening. You're just ignoring the capacity that these East African states have. You're not just ignoring them, but you're going ahead to stamp on them and say, do not grow. What do we tell you from our case? We are considering the whole idea of why specifically are we talking about Asia. We accept that the leading producers, they invest a lot, like they say, they are dominant manufacturers. But what my partner tells you is this: when you look closely, even other countries, even countries from the West, have put these tariffs to stop, to reduce on the products within their country. That's not because they don't need them or what, but it's because they're also developing their own industries, just like East Africa is doing. So why does it then become bad for us to try and grow our own industries at the end of the day? We are talking about sovereignty. They have a problem with it. They think that sovereignty is all about me boasting, oh, I'm independent and all that. We think that is not true. What is the actual importance of sovereignty at the end of the day? It is these East African countries having control about their energy destiny. They're able to make their own decisions. They're able to decide what kind of solving measures do we need to an extent. They are able to point out the different climate problems that you talk about. The people who live in Seoul have no idea about the specific problems you're facing and how you're suffering with them. So who directly interacts with the problem that you're facing at the end of the day? We think it is the East Africans, and we believe that they have capacity to an extent to be able to develop themselves. Already by me telling you that already there is a level of industrialization that is happening, all we need is a chance to be able to grow ourselves and be able to solve our problem better. I'll take you. And that is because of the existence of people like you who are not giving them chance to be able to. And the other thing is this: when you're talking about tariffs, it does not mean that you're completely banning or blocking the interest of these products, but you're regulating them. You're making them expensive. That means that they will stay on the market. People shall still be able to interact with them, maybe the producers, these industries that are growing for research and understanding how they work and all that. But the problem is them flooding on our market. My partner talks about the whole idea of flooding, of dumping. She explains where it comes from, whereby the fact that these people have already been, they already have limited market in Western countries, they turn to East Africa. They ask the reason, oh, why didn't they run to South Africa? You cannot compare Kenya, Uganda, or Tanzania to South Africa. Why? Because South Africa was able to achieve the industrialization goal. How did they? They didn't achieve that by crying, oh my God, China, help me, I don't have technology. They were able to give chance to their talent to be able to grow. They were able to grow their own local market. And I think that is something that is very important that we are basing on today. But furthermore, to expand on why this whole situation is inherently bad for East African countries. When you're talking about the sovereignty in itself, we want to break down the raw material export trap that we are put into, because we have to accept that these finished goods are not made out of nowhere. They are made from our very own raw materials that we own, but we are not even given chance to interact with them, because you've made East Africans believe that you can never grow. You do not have capacity. We think that is very bad. Then also on the other edge is that if we do not put a trade block on these Asian renewable and clean energy technologies, products whatsoever, is that they will keep on flooding the markets, the local markets. It means that already there is stereotype existing within people's minds, like Cynthia, who believe that the only good product is that one that comes from Korea, is that one that comes from China. It means that even if a Ugandan company makes a good product, the local citizens will not be able to interact with it. They will never get to know that beauty. We think that if we had solved problems like climate change, it is us who understand those problems better, and we do have capacity.
Yeah, for those watching at home, welcome to the real debate. I hope you enjoy. Judges, I'm gonna give you the rankings, and if it happens to be like that, then I'm a prophet. All right, I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, here are the rankings of this debate. CO first, OO second, OG third, and CG are not first, second, or third, so they are fourth. All right. Why is this the case? I think, first of all, CG is very derivative of their opening. I don't think they come up with a new extension, which means automatically they cannot rank above their opening, right? But secondly, I think OG's case falls flat on its head. Let me respond to what OG said and what CG said. I think a couple of things, right? One, they say that we can lobby for funding from NGOs in the event where we don't have funding. They say that we can import machines, and Africa has the capacity, skills, and resources, right? They also say that we can create jobs and increase standards of living, better lives for citizens at the end of the day. They say Africa has policies and conserve the environment, and that we are not investing a huge chunk of our budget. We can easily pool resources and then have better climate mitigation circumstances. They say that we are importing finished products is expensive, and we want to save the costs and invest in other resources in order to achieve long-term sustainability, right? I think, first of all, let me respond to each of these arguments. Response number one, I think one, you create dependency still in your world, because at the end of the day, the capacity to access funding is contingent on accessing trade partners, and tariffs ideally reduces the likelihood of people trading with you. Secondly, you ruin the relationships, and notice at the end of the day, the people with the best technology, especially when it comes to this renewable energy, are still the Asians, which means you're still gonna be reliant on the same Asians, and you put tariffs on them. They're more unlikely to trade with you, which means it's your counterproductive. I think that case is logically inconsistent, because if you want the best argument, if you want the best technology, you go to the first mover and the manufacturer themselves. You do not go to someone who invented second, right? Intuition pump for this, when you go to buy meds, you buy the original product, you do not buy the generic product, because at the end of the day, you trust the manufacturer who invented the drug first. Then they say that we create jobs, right? We think this is inherently counterproductive, right? But even if you create jobs, we think loss of lives is more important, right? We need to preserve the lives of citizens at the end of the day. You do not solve the energy crisis and exacerbate the effects of climate change. We think this is inherently wrong, because at the end of the day, you're prioritizing jobs, but at the end of the day, climate change is going to exacerbate its effects on us. We think this is inherently counterproductive. They say also that we have policies, but policies necessarily don't equate change, plus implementation is never adhered to in East Africa. Notice how people ideally violate environmental laws at the end of the day. If people still litter despite the fact that we have dustbins, it just goes to show that at the end of the day, you cannot make people conform to the issues that the policies that you set out, right? They say also that we need to set up industries, right? We think it's more expensive to set up industries because industries takes up billions of dollars and it will require expertise which we do not have. You have to depend on the innovators for their technology at the end of the day. We don't think that it saves costs, we think it exacerbates the cost, because at the end of the day, these industries have to be set up over a long period of time. We think the long-term benefit that they're trying to pursue is highly unlikely to materialize within the next 5, 10 or 30 years. We think also at the point in which you invest a lot of resources in this thing, instead of mitigating the effects of climate change, we think you kill the urgency and the issue at hand, right? They say also that you incentivize investment. We think even if you incentivize investment, this investment is not ideally immediate, right? You cannot guarantee funding, right? They don't prove likelihood. Why then would USA care about having solar panels in Africa and especially East Africa, right? Well, they have issues like homelessness in their own countries. Why would Asia and other countries care about having investment in Africa when you've already blocked the trade routes and ideally made tariffs an issue with them? Why would they care? They don't prove this, right? And CG says a final thing. They said that we have taxes and that's increasing funding for this renewable energy. We think if you already have funding, right, invest in the short-term solution for the long-term gain. We tell you that you would rather subsidize the cost of clean energy, and this is our unique extension from OO, and especially why ideally we create the best benefits, better benefits, right? We think the taxes are gained at the expense of creating access to technology, which means people will still suffer the effects of climate change. People will still suffer hunger. People will still suffer loss of lives, and it becomes then increasingly problematic at the end of the day, right? But they also say that we have knowledge, right? That Africans have knowledge at the end of the day, which means then they have access to information and that they have engineers and innovators. Even if we have knowledge, we are limited in scope. Notice, Asia has specialized knowledge when it comes to these issues, when it comes to renewable energy. They've been doing this for far too long. It is better for us to borrow their technology and reverse engineer it so that we can replicate it at the end of the day. And notice, you will always lag behind even if you have knowledge because they are always innovating by the day. This therefore means that you're always on a rat race. It's a hedonistic treadmill without an end. It's better buying the latest technology. Intuition pump for this. Just because you know how to create a smartphone does not mean you create one. You can easily buy an iPhone and look at the better specs and ideally reverse engineer it. We don't think that's inherently true, right? What then are the harms and benefits that we have in our world? We think one, the biggest harm that these people have is that they slow down development of technology, right? Notice Africa does not have access to this technology and they have limited resources. It's better to prioritize mitigation over ideally solvency. The solvency does not materialize in time. We think this is inherently unlikely.
I remain Benon Mokwaya. Future Icons continues next week, Saturday 3:30 p.m. Still here at Makerere, University, Kampala.
UBC, inspiring Uganda.